Hi everyone, and welcome to the 6th episode of the News Fest. Today we have 4 more super interesting short stories for you. Well, news stories, but for you. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one.
Yep. So the first one is about controversial new labor laws set up to shake up working life in Greece. And critics claim employment law reforms will abolish 8-hour days. So Greece is set for the biggest shakeup of the working life in decades after its pro-business government sought to ban Parliament's passage of controversial labor laws as a fresh start for a nation once at the center of Europe's financial crisis. The passage of legislation described as outdated by opponents and positively life-changing by supporters came within hours of the EU's top executive arriving in Athens on Thursday to endorse a post-pandemic recovery plan for the country. So the European president said that they're very happy to announce the Commission has given the green light for Greece's national recovery plan, and this plan is going to transform the Greek economy. This new legislation has been dubbed as Greece 2.0, and the scheme foresees about 26 billion euros in grants and loans being unlocked to support 175 critical investments in areas ranging from the environment to digital reform. The overjoyed scenes were in stark contrast to the strikes, demonstrations, and fiery debate that had unfolded before the MPs late on Wednesday voted through labor reforms, likened by the veteran trade unionist Gregorius to Thatcherite policies on steroids. The measures include changes such as allowing employees to opt for longer working days in exchange for time off. So, for a former banker bent on modernizing the economy, the workplace changes are long overdue. Addressing the chamber prior to 150 deputies endorsing the employment laws, he called the reformers essential, saying that the bill would bring Greece in line with the rest of Europe by overhauling legislation that dates back to a pre-internet era and aligning it with the digital age. The reforms also set rules on remote work and include safeguards against sexual harassment in workplace. The nucleus of this legislation is worker-friendly and it's deeply growth-oriented, but it dismisses the claims it will formally abolish the 8-hour working day. So, although they have faced fierce resistance over the bill, opposition parties have decreed the reforms, arguing that they roll back long-established worker rights in the name of flexibility, and they also erode legal protections. So they're accused by critics to exploiting lockdowns imposed as a result of COVID-19 pandemic to ram the continuous bill through Parliament. You're baptizing the Middle Ages, the Enlightenment, with the logic of more work, less pay, and no protection, said the former Prime Minister, who vowed to annul the reforms if he wins the next election. Under the legislation, employees would be forced to work overtime, but would have to be content with a day of extra pay. He added that this means working more for less pay and without job security. The center-left movement for Change Party described the regulations as ruthless, claiming passage of reforms such as paternity leave were fig leaf for the adoption of neoliberal policies that would facilitate dismissals and prevent strike action. In the face of these policies, any progressive citizen cannot remain indifferent or silent. Time off does not pay the bills or holidays. The reforms were also blasted as a clear attempt to break the power of trade unions, with opponents citing the stipulation that enterprises, including public utilities, continue to run with a third of security personnel when strikes are called. Every right, every responsibility that unions have won has been underdetermined. Collective work agreements have been annulled by individual work contracts that favor employees. The 8-hour workday has been replaced by 10 hours of workday, with the promise of less work on other days and overtime payments being lost. What we're seeing 48 years later are Thatcherite policies on steroids once again. In a nation with a vibrant tradition of unions organizing walkouts and protest rallies, it's remained to be seen whether many of the measures could be enforced. This is a country where unemployment officially is still about 15%, and the real figure following the pandemic is about 20%. There's no way in such a climate that strike action will be obstructed. Based on the views of the people of Greece on this new labor law, they will probably use all their might to resist it. Yes, that is it for my story right now. So what do you guys think about the new labor laws in Greece?
So from what I understood, their days are going to be increased, but they're going to lose overtime pay and they're going to get more days off?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not quite sure I'm for that, to be honest.
Yeah, because And not, in all honesty, I think that the days are already long enough as it is. And so I think by increasing the time that people spend at work without getting overtime pay can be, to some extent, demotivating and could affect their work.
Yeah, I
So
think
I don't think it's a very practical law.
Yeah, I think people are gonna get more sick of it more easily because even though it's like from 8 to 10 hours, it's 2 hours. Like it's not a huge amount. To the people who sit there, or like who are office workers, for example, and they just have to sit at their desks for 10 hours, like those 2 extra hours matter a lot. And I think, yeah. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I agree with
Yeah,
you
you can
guys,
kind of
like-
also
oh,
put
sorry.
this in. Oh, sorry, Hannah, go.
Okay, so like yeah, I also like think that like the employees will get demotivated, and that won't be really efficient for the company too. So yeah.
It also depends, I
Yeah,
think,
so
on how many breaks they get throughout the day. Sorry. It also depends on how many breaks they get throughout the day.
Yeah, because like what I'm thinking about is like if you were to put that in the context of school, since we don't work, it's like we already have 7 hours of school, and if we're to add 2, it'd be 9 hours. And I know I definitely wouldn't want to do that because already with the 7 hours, I'm exhausted by the end of the day. If I were to add 2 extra lessons, I wouldn't be able to do it, I don't think.
So to sum it up, basically what's happening is that they actually, before the law, they have 8 hours of workday, which is set, which is not like negotiable. But now what they're doing is that you can work more days, and then you can use that to take more days off, like not more days, but you can use that to take days off later if you work more. And so what companies are not doing is that, they're forcing laborers to work longer, or, laborers don't have an option but to work longer so that they can get at least 1 or 2 days off later. But if they don't work longer, then they get no days off. So, and in this way, they're losing their job security because, with the 8-hour workday, you have so much more job security, and they're able to they know that they won't lose their jobs if they only work for 8 hours. But because with the competition between laborers right now, especially like pandemic, people are, they're like, okay, people who work more are gonna stay in the company, and people who don't work enough, they're gonna fire them because people like right now companies are firing employees because of the low demand for products. Yeah.
All right. So just to make sure I understood, sorry.
So they're exploiting it, basically.
Basically,
yeah.
Oh, that's controversial.
Yeah, Marian.
No, I was just to make sure I understood the concept. So what happened is it's technically like an optional thing to follow. However, it's the companies that are forcing their employees to kind of follow through.
Yeah, exactly.
Due to the
also
competition.
Don't have an option themselves because if they want to keep up with the competition that's there with other laborers and to stay in the company, they have to work more hours to show that they're willing to stay. So it's really good for their life.
Okay.
Okay, that's it for my story.
Hold on, I was just gonna say something that you have to be understanding of the company that that when you think they're gonna keep the employees that work longer, it makes sense for the company. It makes sense for the company.
Of course.
It's just that the problem is that they're exploiting that law. But the company, they want what's best for themselves. So obviously they're gonna take the people who work longer hours.
Yeah, and I feel like the employee's gonna be burnt out at that, like in the long consequences, and I think there'll be like more labor turnover, which would affect the company really negatively,
Yeah.
She's got a point.
Yeah, well, companies need to make their profits. So I think the person who the people who actually need to reconsider the law is the government who's imposing it, and the prime minister and the president and the prime minister who are imposing the law, and you're letting it pass through. So I think they're the ones who need to reconsider and But I don't think this law is gonna work because the trade unions in Greece are so strong that they oppose that every single thing that they don't think is right. So that's what I think it's gonna happen. They're gonna oppose with all their rights.
Yeah.
That's it for the second story then?
First story. So let's move on to the second story now.
Yeah. So in regards to the second story, I'll be talking about how conspiracy theorists are actually using the CDC, which is Centers for Disease Control database, to spread misinformation and fear. So there's actually an anti-vaccine movement in the US where they're using the vaccine and weaponizing it to take control and twist the facts. Take control of the people and by twisting the facts. So the vaccine adverse events reporting system, which is also known as the virus. I'm not entirely sure how to say that. So it's actually a program for the vaccine safety, which is run by the CDC and has become the launching pad for conspiracy theories that claim that the COVID-19 vaccine has caused thousands of deaths and serious illnesses. And as of June 7th, the virus logged 5,208 unconfirmed reports of death among alleged vaccine recipients, amounting up to 0.0017% of the total COVID-19 vaccine doses administered in the United States. Yet these CDCs say that careful review of those deaths has not established a causal link to the COVID-19 vaccine, with the exception of a small handful of plausible instances of rare blood clots from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which in very rare cases can lead to death. So the Dr. Saad Omer, which is a director of the Yale Institute for Global Health, says that they are incredibly safe vaccine, especially the ones that are being used in the US and in Canada. The anti-vaccine groups are using the numbers in a different way, as they claim that the sheer volume of the virus reports tells the story of a huge safety cover-up. They often mix in individual unverified reports with the seemingly overwhelming and equally unverified statistics. A prominent anti-vaccine advocacy group called the American Frontline Doctors, or AFD, has promoted a now deleted various report that claims a 2-year-old child who would not have been eligible for the vaccine to actually die from it. It is a claim that echoed in several Facebook posts and have been flagged as misinformation. The group did not respond to the Global News request for comments. Many of the other reported deaths in the bears are just as questionable. 2 of the supports vaccine fatalities list gunshot wounds as a cause of death. Furthermore, reports have been made where the cause of death is not specified or the death is not directly linked to the person. For example, one report explained how a 77-year-old woman in Minnesota died 1 month after receiving her first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. It does not specify a cause of death. Another case would actually refer to a 90-year-old Arkansas woman who died 2 weeks after receiving her first dose of the Moderna vaccine. The report notes that she tested positive for COVID-19 and explicitly states that there is no evidence that the vaccination caused the patient's death. It simply didn't have the time to save her life. There are countless other reports of such people who have died from some point after receiving their vaccination through these circumstances that are not conclusively linked to the vaccine. So what do you guys think about this?
This is the whole conflict of the anti-vax community. I think these are the same people that are going to tell you AIDS can be cured with essential oils. No, it won't. No, it won't work. I think these people that choose to think that the COVID vaccine is going to kill you no matter what, or it's like a government tool to spy on wherever you go. I think the government has more important things to do than spy on you going to Walmart. It's not that big of a deal. And I think that these people also don't necessarily do their research when they make these claims. They don't necessarily they find falsified news articles that they find on Facebook that are completely biased, not biased, but bogus. And then they choose to believe them over the 1 million articles that are going to tell you COVID vaccines are useful. They're going to find that one article that's going to say COVID vaccine kills you, and then they're going to choose to believe that over all the odds. So, yes.
I actually, there's also
You can go. You can.
Like also I know that there are some like side effects that vaccine can like have on the people, right? But like looking at these reports, like both are really old people. Like was it 77 and 90 years old? And so I feel like those cases would have more like side effects on them probably, but like an LSAT it doesn't mean that everyone has that side effect, and it's really important to have everyone vaccinated so we can get rid of this COVID situation as quick as possible.
Yeah. There's also the fact that yeah. Okay. So there's also the fact that the vaccine it helps reduce the chances of getting the COVID, but doesn't remove the chance 100%. It's just kind of like a safeguard to reduce the probability of you actually getting it. And in the case of a 90-year-old, they are more towards the more affected side of the population, which need more care and more caution in regards to the
virus.
To the virus, yeah. So like that's why I think that the actual reports of how it's like the two which I have used aren't really valid in terms of using them as an example of how the vaccine has killed the person, because as I have mentioned, it could just be a possibility that it just didn't have the time to actually react, or their immune system was just too weak.
Yeah, so I actually kind of disagree with you all in some aspects because, there are people who have been affected because of the vaccine because of blood clots, and they may not be over, like, yeah, of course, there's like the factor of being over 40 or being over 50 or whatever. But, there are people, but I feel like, people like, when they get affected because you don't know what it's from and, what it could cause, there are people who are completely healthy who, excuse me, who have been affected by the vaccine. And so, but I feel like, the hospitals, they ignore this and they don't report it because they're not sure whether it's because of the vaccine or because maybe some other external factors or something else. And like, there are people who are close to me. There's one guy who was close to me who has got affected by the vaccine. And we don't know why, because he's completely healthy. But they're not reporting it because, you don't know why it happened. And they just choose not to because it would negatively affect the vaccine. And even if they did, it's only like one case out of, I don't know, 100 maybe. One case out of 100, 1,000, I don't know. And so no one would believe them. And so, yeah, some articles are obviously falsified and like, you shouldn't choose to believe that one article out of 10. But I feel like even articles, like, news articles are so controlled by the government and that they don't want to, because it's like they don't want to like show that the vaccines are bad for people. So obviously they won't release any news articles stating that people have died from the vaccine or, people have been affected by the vaccine. So in that way, I think, I think that, what they should do as a solution is that they should research more, and they should obviously not stop giving the vaccine, but, be more careful as to who they're giving the vaccine to. Because, when I went to take the vaccine, they didn't ask if I had any like anything like diabetes or anything else. They didn't ask any like health side effects I had. So, people, they should be more careful about this stuff. And, each vaccine, like now, like I know AstraZeneca has a limit to as like what age group can take it. So I know, like, I think people above 40 or maybe people above 50 can't take the vaccine anymore because of the blood clots that were forming in the age of people. So I think what they should do, even like Pfizer and everything, like, they're not completely effective to everyone, but and they won't apply to everyone. It always has side effects to some people. So what they should do is that, they should research more and check it out and, see which group does this like vaccine not apply to, which group of people would it not apply to, and, explicitly state that and tell them that, okay, this group should not take this vaccine because it could have side effects. Yeah.
Right. So I completely agree with you. I do. But when you look at it this way, there are almost 8 billion people on this earth. And at least 5 billion, I'm going to make random assumptions, I'm terrible at assumptions, but at least 4 to 5 billion of those people are eligible to get a vaccine. Their hospitals don't have the time, nor do they have the resources to stop and ask every person, do you have diabetes? Are you ill? So I think that's also up to the patient to go, I have diabetes or I'm ill in this sense. Can I still get the vaccine? I think the patients should also be more forthcoming when they ask these questions. hospitals actually, there are COVID centers, but general hospitals aren't entirely centered around COVID. Like, they don't have all their staff entirely centered to give you the vaccine. And to be honest, we're not the most important person in the world, you know? So I think that because of the limited resources, they don't necessarily have the time to ask all these questions, and they expect the patients to go ahead and take initiative and care about their safety as much as the doctors do by giving them the vaccine, you know?
I feel like what
But
the
I completely
companies
agree with
like
you.
who made the vaccines should do is like they should actually like give out a report or something that like if someone has like these allergies or some of the disease should not take the vaccination because it could have side effects on them. And also like it's
Say
the
that, you know,
yeah.
like tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I said, like every hospital cannot ask like every single patient about that. So I feel like people have to be responsible to actually research about it and then do the vaccination.
There's also the fact that these vaccines were created in the state of urgency. They were created really, really fast because they just needed to get something out because people were dying all over the place and they were like, we have no solution yet. So they had to make it really fast to come up with a solution, and maybe necessarily didn't have the time because they just wanted to get something good out. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was good, you know? So I think, yeah, it's gonna take a bit more research to make sure to get the perfect vaccine. But then it brings up the question, is there such a thing as a perfect vaccine?
Yeah, of course. That's a different topic itself.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So we will now be moving on to the third topic.
Okay, so on May 22nd, the Nyiragongo volcano in Eastern Democratic Congo erupted around 6 p.m. local time. Residents of Goma, a city of 2 million people 10 kilometers from Nyiragongo volcano, evacuated to their eastern neighbor, Luanda, with necessities. The Luandan government said that 3,000 refugees had already crossed the Luanda border, and other residents fled to higher ground in the west. The Nyiragongo volcano is one of the most active volcanoes on Earth, which last erupted in 2002. At that time, 250 people were killed and 1,200,000 people were displaced. The first recorded eruption was in 1884, and it then exploded 5 times in the 1890s and dozens in 1900s. Nyiragongo volcano is known to be the only volcano in the world where lava lakes have survived since the discovery of lava lakes at the bottom of 1,250-meter diameter calculated crater. It is located in Virunga National Park and is home to many wild animals such as elephants, lions, nutritions, hyenas, monkeys, hippos, and mountain gorillas. The officials at Virunga National Park, where Nyiragongo volcano is located, told staff that the eruption was similar to the 2002 eruption, and people around the airport should evacuate immediately. Earlier, the Democratic Congo Communication Minister Patrick Muyay tweeted that the Prime Minister was discussing emergency countermeasures after calling an emergency meeting in the capital, Kinshasa. However, residents' complaints grew as the government did not provide enough information and different ministries were confused on social media. Also, the announcement about the possibilities of a second explosion have been reversed, adding to anxiety and more confusion among the refugees. Lava from the volcano Nyiragongo flowed southward, hitting airports in Goma and eastern Goma, losing power in most parts downtown Goma, and highways leading to the nearby city of Beni were covered with lava. And as a result, about 30 people were killed and about 3,500 houses were destroyed. Yeah, this is it. How do you guys think about this story?
So, from what I understand, a volcano erupted, and so people had to leave the country.
Yeah, but like many of the people were damaged, like hurt because there were really like miscommunication through social media and really confused the refugees to evacuate.
Okay. Well, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, it's not really a controversial story.
That's a big problem. How can you not have communications when a volcano has just erupted? Like it's quite straightforward. It's a volcano erupted, get out of the country, you know?
Well,
I think they need to
it's an LADC, so you know. they obviously don't have enough communication set up to warn the people of
Right.
the country. But obviously, because they also don't have the resources to, because they're in LEDC, so they don't have the resources to be able to tell the citizens, or even or even estimate as to when the volcano is going to erupt, or how fast it's going to damage the country, or I don't know. And also, additionally, volcanoes, they're going to have so much effects on the health of the people, not just the damages that they cause, but the health, because they excrete sulfur, and the smell, and the obviously everything that comes with all volcano, all the gas and emissions and everything, it's going to be so bad for the people who live there. And yeah, it's going to cause a lot of economic damage as well, because they're obviously not going to be able to produce anything in the couple coming months. And the government's going to put all their money into subsidizing and helping the economy, and helping the rebuild and the regrowth of the homes, and the
Surrounding countries are also going to have to put a lot of time into this, because obviously, because of everyone's going to be leaving Congo into the neighboring countries. So it's going to require a lot of generous action from the surrounding countries, and not just pushing the people who try to look for safety back into a country where they know they don't have a chance. They have a limited chance of survival. This is really the time where people need to bond together and just say, okay, I know you're going through a hard time. Come over here until that subsides or passes over.
Yeah.
Anything to say? Anything else to say?
So
honestly, no. All my main points have actually already been said. So
yeah. Okay. So let's move on to our fourth story.
If you have something to add.
Fourth story, my story. Okay, so this is quite a heavy story. So the Israeli military has launched airstrikes in Gaza in response to incendiary balloons launched from coastal enclave. So the recent Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a stranger to absolutely no one. And the recent fighting between Israel and Hamas erupted after weeks of tension in Jerusalem, where a group of Palestinian families faced eviction from their homes in East Jerusalem in favor of Jewish nationalists. In addition, during the holy month of Ramadan, there were a series of incidents in which Palestinians saw as highly provocative, including the closing of popular meeting places near the Old City and the entrance of Israeli police into the Al-Aqsa Mosque on a number of occasions. There were regular clashes in and around the mosque compound, during which police fired stun grenades, and rubber-coated bullets, while Palestinians threw stones, causing the injury of hundreds of Palestinians and a few Israeli soldiers. The Israeli military stuck targets in Gaza overnight on Wednesday, the 16th of June, and while incendiary balloons were launched from Gaza earlier that day. According to reports in the Israeli media, the incendiary balloons launched from Gaza sparked multiple fires in southern Israel. The airstrikes are the first in Gaza since the ceasefire, which went into effect nearly 1 month ago. The IDF, or the Israel Defense Forces, said it struck Hamas military complexes and meeting places for Khan Yunis and Gaza brigades. The incendiary balloons are filled with helium with incendiary devices fixed to them. They were floated into Israel before and after the airstrikes. The IDF says the balloons were launched as a protest to the provocative flag march in Jerusalem, where thousands of Israelis marched through the Old City. Far-right Jewish extremists taking part in the parade chanted "Death to Arabs" and "This is our home." Israeli police in riot gear blocked surrounding streets, forcibly removing Palestinian protesters from the route. 33 Palestinian protesters were injured by stun grenades, rubber bullets, live fire, and 6 of them were evacuated to the hospital, following clashes with the Israeli security forces around East Jerusalem, stated by the Palestinian Red Crescent Society. The march was seen as the first major test to Israel's new government, led by right-wing Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. In the past, Bennett had pushed former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Netanyahu to take a tougher stance against Hamas and the launching of incendiary balloons, according to Israeli media. After the Israeli airstrikes, Hamas spokesperson Hazem Qasim said on Twitter, "The Zionist bombing of the Gaza Strip is a failed attempt to stop our people's solidarity and resistance with the Holy City and to cover up the unprecedented state of confusion for the Zionist establishment in organizing the so-called Flag March." Hamas and other militant groups in Gaza did not immediately respond with rocket fire into Israel, but the situation along the Israel-Gaza border still remains incredibly tense, and the possibility of an imminent and serious escalation cannot be ruled out. These airstrikes, however, aren't the worst violence that has occurred as a result of this conflict. Over 11 days from March 10th, the Israeli Defense Forces, or the IDF, carried out a devastating aerial bombardment of Gaza, while Palestinian militant group Hamas fired thousands of rockets into Israel. Israeli strikes during the recent conflict killed at least 248 Palestinians, including 66 children, according to the Hamas health officials. At least 12 people in Israel were killed, including 2 children, by Palestinian militant fire from Gaza, according to Israel's military and emergency service. A ceasefire was then agreed on to May 21st and followed a whirlwind of diplomatic attempts to push for an end to the hostilities. So that's my story. Quite a heavy topic.
From what I know, because I remember researching about this topic a while back, and so from what I know, like this is not something that's like the conflict between Arabs and Jewish minority is not like, it's not something that's recent. It's actually a 100-year-old issue, and this happened because the British took control of Palestine, and then they also and then the land was inhabited by like Arabs and Jewish, and so then the two they started clashing, and that's how the conflict began. So just looking at it in recent times, and they're saying both are clashing. So I think this not only affects obviously people are being injured and during this whole conflict, and maybe a lot of people are suffering losses as well, but not just that, but I think people they need to not only think from maybe their perspective, a conflict is war or harming people is not always the best way to resolve conflicts. Conflicts can be resolved through other means as well. I think that war or harming people should always be the last option, and I think the first option should obviously be trying to understand different points of view, if that makes sense, and different perspectives. Yeah.
Kind of like a discussion or negotiations between the two different parties to try and come to an understanding or an agreement that would prevent the war. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I feel maybe those two have misunderstanding of both sides. Maybe that's why this is more engaged. I'm not so sure about that, but like Nikita said, war or being in a conflict isn't the answer for everything. So yeah, I think they should I think that it's better for them to actually have a meeting or just have discussion about their opinions and have both perspectives understood.
Well, yeah, but when you think about that, this is an age-old conflict. It hasn't, like Nikita said, it didn't just appear. There are lots of, I think, underlying issues that they need to fix, and it's not going to be that simple anymore. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not going to be as simply solved as maybe a number of conflicts that are going on in the world because it's so old. So I think it's going to take a lot more than just a discussion over tea, just saying, okay, here's what needs to be fixed and here's how we're going to do it. I think there's a lot more that needs to go through.
I think it's a conflict over whose land or whose territory is which, right? Which is, if I'm not wrong, is that right?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a conflict over whose land which belongs to which part, obviously. But I think it's very similar to the India-Pakistan conflict as well. We're both fighting over the same thing, like territories, like who does Kashmir belong to? And I think, they can always come to an agreement of like, there's always different ways and conflict, because I know like India, Pakistan is also a very, very old conflict that dates to ages ago. So, but they may have conflicts, but they come to agreements at, like, suppose like for Kashmir, like there's India Kashmir and then there's the Pakistan Kashmir. So they've like divided it into the two. And what they can do is they could, instead of fighting over the territory and saying, oh no, they both think they won over the territory, and then they fight over who won on that territory. Instead of fighting on that over who won, they can like maybe divide it or split it, or like find other ways than conflict. In conflicts, not only people of each country like they get injured, but also like people in other countries who are sitting, they start like fights, like people in our school, for example, it's an international school, like students, they start fighting with each other because of their beliefs and their like because of their support to their country. And
but relating to that, it's Palestine, it's using this context and putting it to, for example, to two different countries. It's kind of like you've got France has its territory and Spain has its own territory. It's kind of like Spain is invading France for more territory and then causing a negotiation between the two so that Spain can get more territory. It's kind of like, from what I understand, it's kind of like that context. So doing a negotiation and then sharing the land isn't something I think would actually be simple, considering how Palestine is already its own country. And saying, oh, just because we want to prevent war, we'll split the country, or we'll split our land to give you more. I think that's kind of, I don't think that really work well. Although I do get your point, but I don't think it really. Because personally, if I were to share something that's already mine just because someone else would want it, I don't think I'd be okay with that.
Mm. Well then,
so, do you get my point?
Yeah.
Or does it like?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure how to explain it, because what Nikita was trying to say is like just share the land.
No.
To avoid conflict.
What I was saying is because they're fighting over Gaza, right? Which is initially what I think they are doing. Palestine, they're both fighting over Gaza, and so it's it belongs to someone. It's like it's Gaza, right? So they're fighting over that place. So obviously, instead of fighting over Gaza and like saying who won it over or whose territory should belong to, they could try to come to a negotiation to split it, and like we've done for India and Pakistan, because even we have it, like Kashmir, that's where the India-Pakistan border passes through, and so we have the India Kashmir and then we have the Pakistan Kashmir.
Yes, I understand your point now. That makes more sense. Okay.
A simple solution to the issue would just to accept cohabitation.
Exactly.
Both people can live there. Both religions can be a part of it. And instead of dividing everything, just say, let's work it together. And, animals cohabitate, animals live together. Lions live in the same area as a zebra. Doesn't mean you're going to die if you're a zebra. You just have to run fast. But, if animals can cohabitate, we can too. I think there's a more underlying issue to this. It's not, they're not going to solve it easily.
The cultures live here in Dubai and we all live together. Like, even our school is an international school and we mix together and we work together, right? Like, why can't countries do that together? Like, why do they always have to go to conflict? Like, that should be the last option they think of. Like, they should think about, trying to mix cultures, like not trying to like, separate them and like make your own territories between like making border lines. Instead of doing that, why don't you just work together over Gaza and like let people live in there like as they are.
I think there's a very religious undertone to this. I think that religion is playing a big part of this, and because people's faiths are so strong and they want to protect their religion because they believe it's right and they have a right to believe it's right because that's what they were taught, that's what they believe in, which is completely fair. I think that people are so protective over their religion and they think their religion is so right. So they're right. I think that's why also there's the conflict is heavy.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's all for today, and that's 4 stories, everyone. Please stay updated for more.
Yep, go ahead and just subscribe to us. We'll do our best to upload as often as we can.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day. Stay safe.
Goodbye.